Hey, what's up everybody? Joshua Casper back at you with Plugin Boutique, and today we're taking a close look at Sketch Cassette II from Aberrant DSP. This is an absolutely wonderful plugin if you're looking to get those vintage tape style vibes. You have a ton of control over the degradation, the quality, the saturation, and even some really unique Wow and Flutter options, and a really cool noise reduction compressor trick to add character to your sound. Now, this obviously lends itself to low file style productions, and that's what I'm using it here. Another note, I'm using it on the full mix, but obviously having Sketch Cassette 2 as a plugin, you can use it on a channel by channel basis and really tweak out individual sounds instead. But I figure to give you the best sound profile or the best audio experience of what Sketch Cassette can do, I'll throw it on the master so it has the full frequency range. You can really hear what it's doing. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. The main section here are the tape settings over here on the top left. We have type 1, type 2, and type 4. These actually correspond to tapes and how the tape records the sound in the real world. And these were accurately modeled from type 1, type 2, and type 4 tape styles. Type 1 was ferric, type 2 was from chrome, and type 4 was metal. And when I saw that and I did a little bit of research, I was like, well, where is type 3? And it's actually a fascinating story that type 3 wasn't picked up, but just read this article on Wikipedia about these things if you're interested at all. It's really, really cool just to know. But Aberrant DSP have really gone ahead and modeled each one and really given you a lot of controls over the final sound. So you've got those three different types there. Then you've got the bypass button, which will just bypass the entire tape section, but you still have options here, and these will still affect the sound. But once you have one type selected, you then have cheap, value, standard, or master, and this is the quality of the tape. And then on top of that, you also have an age control down here. So all in all, you've got 12 different variations. You got 3 types and 4 different qualities. And then with that, or those combined with the age down here, you really can transform the sound. So type 1 through type 4 are going to change the frequency response of the tape. So it's essentially like adding a custom filter curve or an EQ curve to the tape once you engage one. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and play this audio. I'm going to pull the saturation down, pull the hiss down. I'm going to pull the flutter and the wow. I'm going to set the noise reduction compressor off. Essentially, I'm going to deactivate everything except for the tape here. And there is a mix control for the tape, so I'm going to push that up to 100%. Turn down the compressor value. We'll talk about that later. I'm just going to go ahead and flip through the different variations here just to give you an idea. I'm also going to be adjusting the age slider over here just because it really further adds to what you can get by way of variations to the character of the sound once it's passed through this wonderful plugin. And before we jump in, it just looks awesome, by the way. It's got a sketch feel. It looks like it's been sketched by hand, and I really dig it. It's character by the way of eye candy and character by the way of ear candy. So it's just a wonderful plugin all around. So let's just go ahead and play it and see if you can spot the differences between the 3 types here. So again, kudos to whoever designed this because it just looks great. Each one of the tapes has a different style to it. Looks great and sounds really cool. And essentially what I gather here just by listening is type 1 cheap. You're going to have a lot of the higher frequency content rolled off. It's going to be almost muffled, especially when you bring the age down to worn. And up here, type 4 on the master quality, you're going to be pretty close to the full frequency spectrum. Not completely, but I mean, you're going to be getting most of what you want. You'll also might have noticed on type 4 is it almost rolls off some of the low end while it's accurately bringing in the higher frequency content of the track itself. Some of the low end is actually gone. Type 2 really pushes the higher frequency content into the forefront. And again, any one of these mixture of types and qualities and then the age is just going to give you a different frequency profile of the outcoming audio. So from there, we have the presets, and you got a ton of them inside of here, different categories, pretty straightforward. I'm not going to go through those. You can get into those once you get your hands on the plugin. But you also have input and output gain adjustments down here with the in and out. So that's another way to add distortion and saturation on top of the saturation control down here. If you double click the any parameter, it'll set it back to its default. So hiss, a very pleasant hiss, if I do say so myself, can go quite loud. I would have that on when I was doing my final bounce, but when I'm actually producing, I don't like to have it. So I turn that down. You can also throw like a gate on there just so it automatically turns off. Saturation, let's just go ahead and play it. So saturation sounds really, really wonderful. A is a more relaxed one, while B is definitely the more aggressive one, really pushing it into like almost a digital distortion type sound. And obviously, depending on your tape configuration and the age, the saturation is going to be different and play a different role on whatever you're doing. Moving from there, we've got the Wow and Flutter. This is a pretty standard thing to have on any tape VST. What it does is emulates the pitch fluctuations from bad motors in your tape player. So if your motor in your tape player happens to speed up and push the tape past the tape head quicker, you're going to get a higher pitch. And if it slows down, you're going to get a lower pitch. And Wow just introduces that to the playback. Wow is a slower modulation, and then Flutter is a quicker modulation. Essentially the same thing, just Wow is slower while Flutter is quicker. So here we have the control over the depth of that, and then we have the control over the rate of that. So and we also have different shapes. We have random, sine, and then reverse and regular sawtooth as well. So let's just go ahead and tweak those out. So see if we can't spot them. So probably your random is your best bet to get a natural sense of that, just because what you're essentially doing is saying, oh, my motors and my tape are, you can't count on them. I just want to point out that I'd probably never use Wow and Flutter to extreme amounts on a master. I would definitely be using them on my pads or my pianos or my guitar on a single channel to add that into it. But again, I just wanted to give you the full picture here, so that's why I've got it on the master. So other really cool things about the Wow and Flutter is if I hit this button right here, one, we get this really cool sketch animation again. And what we're doing now is using the Wow as a modulator for the Flutter. So we can just further get some really experimental and engaging and cool sounding effects by doing it this way as well. Another really cool thing about the Wow and Flutter is we can actually sync it to the tempo. Now, this would never happen in the real world, but you can really use it to your artistic advantage by maybe syncing it to the drum beat on a piano to have it kind of slur in a particular way to almost add more rhythm to whatever you're working on. Once you have that synced up, these become synced. So a quarter note here, maybe a 16th note here. Obviously we'd want to have it on the sine wave if we were looking to do it as something timed instead of having it a random thing. But you can also have the offset, so you can push the Wow to the front or to the back, and the same with the Flutter. Again, double clicking on any of those will bring them back. Just a really cool extra bit there. Another really cool thing, again, this Wow and Flutter thing has just gone is next level, is the flanging. And the flanging, what that does is sends the original audio, and then the Wow and Flutter changes essentially moves it in front or back a little bit, and that creates a kind of slurring flanging effect. Again, just one more unique feature inside of Sketch Cassette 2. You know, having that on your pads would sound fantastic. If I actually have the pads here, let me go ahead and just copy Sketch Cassette and drop it on here. So this is what the pads sound like. And then this is what they sound like with the Sketch Cassette, with all of the effects that we've already added during the walkthrough here, including that flanger. I mean, that's a really aggressive amount of it, but it just sounds fantastic. There's no way you can convince me that that doesn't sound awesome. It just really does. So from there, we've got the dropouts, which is just going to add audio dropouts. Essentially, again, where this happens is when you have a tape on a loop, at some point it has to be glued together, and that space where the glue is, actually you can't have audio there because it's just glue. And what this kind of does is mimics that, and you can obviously add a bunch of it. You can actually push it into the stereo field if you want, or you can have it on mono. This is a more realistic approach to it. And then you have, again, the depth amount. Let me turn down the flutter here and the flanging. Let me put it on type 4 standard. So obviously that's a lot. We're really degrading the sound at this point. So when it's completely open on the width, we're actually getting audio dropouts on the left and the right instead of the entire tape. So another really cool feature to have, and the fact that you have so much control over the final sound is just gonna make things so much better and so much more authentic sounding. I would have it on mono, just a slight depth and a slight intensity, just to add a little bit of extra character. Cool. And then after that, the final thing we got here is the noise reduction compressor. And this is actually used by mimicking the decoding and encoding and switching them around and doing it the way it shouldn't be done. And what this actually does is can introduce some higher frequency content. So again, if you remember type 1 cheap, pretty worn or pretty used is going to be a pretty muffled sound. We can actually use the noise reduction compressor to crank in some bright, fuller upper frequency content. You will notice also that if we do it at an extreme level like this, we're actually going to start to lose some of the lower frequency content. So it's a trade-off there on what you're trying to do and the final sound you're going for. Again, I know I've pointed it out more than once already, but I am running this on the master. I would never push it this far on the master. I would use this on the master just to add a little bit of character, but something like this where I'd really want to be cranking and changing the sound, I'd be doing it on a channel per channel basis. But of course, that's completely a possibility once you have this great plugin in your toolbox. Anyway, that's Sketch Cassette 2, a brief introduction to it. I highly recommend it if you're looking to get the vintage sound of cassette or just a vintage sound in general. It's available already on pluginboutique.com. I'm going to leave links to it in the video description. And as always, I'm Joshua Casper here for Plugin Boutique. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next video.